Okay, good morning, everybody. Morning, everybody in the chamber and to those watching online. Welcome to the April meeting of North Norfolk District Council's Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, we do, Chair. We have apologies from councillors Bailey, Fletcher and Penfold.
Lovely, thanks very much. Do we have any substitutes?
No, Chair.
Lovely. Do we have any? Sorry.
Councillor Bayes has also sent his apology. Sorry, came up by me.
Thank you.
Right. Public questions and statements?
None, sir.
None, do we? Minutes. Well, before we approve them as a correct factual record, there's a couple of typos.
Okay.
Then Councillor Shards' name doesn't come out clearly on the page, first page. 9 budget monitoring, line 4, second paragraph, it's waste recycling. And it's on the last paragraph, but line 4, it's within the budget setting process. Lovely. And I had a couple of questions of follow-up, but I think you mentioned you were chasing. Is that
Yes,
correct?
there's a couple of follow-ups that Councillor Shires was going to provide some information and I will.
Okay. So those minor details out of the way, are you content that it's a factual record of the meeting? Yeah, would someone like to propose them? And second them? Yeah, lovely. And all in favour? Thanks very much. I don't think we have any items of urgent business, do we?
No, number C, Chair.
No. Right, no, any declarations of interest, members, today? No. I don't think we have a petition, do we?
No, we don't.
And we don't have any matters referred to us by a member?
No.
And do we have any responses of the council or cabinet?
Number C, no. Okay.
So moving swiftly on, we'll consider the flash progress update, which is for us to note. Is someone going to take it? We have all read it, of course, Officer Hems. Do you want to take us, highlight anything that might not have been obvious?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think the report is. I think by way of a little bit of a further update. Post me writing the report, progress has been made on one of the issues that we identified, which was the steel work. I know this because I was very excited when driving past along the bypass to see a very large crane swinging steels about one weekend. So much to my wife's annoyance, I had to detour and go and make sure it was the steels being put up. But those issues around the steel frame are now resolved, and that work is progressing, which I'm really pleased about because it was a little bit of a concern. And I think the other thing is that obviously the position around the grant for the 3G pitch has now been confirmed by the Football Foundation, and we're currently working our way through the planning application process associated with that works. So all in all, things are coming along very nicely. There has been a degree of rescheduling of works needed to cope with some slight delays in some areas, but the contractor is doing a really good job of managing those, and we are on track at the moment for completion as per the timetable, which is during December of this year. So that will be for the main swim and sports centre works. The 3G pitches activity is scheduled to take place at a later date, sort of almost as one is leaving site, the other one hopefully will come onto site and complete those works. And that's really about maintaining separation of the two contractors and keeping the site clean clean in inverted commas, from the point of view of enabling one contractor to go off site and the other one to come on and not have other trades tramping across tramping across a building site, etc. So yeah, in general, I'm very pleased with where things are, and work is progressing well, but I'm happy to take any questions that members might have.
Members to anyone have any questions? Councillor Cushing, given it's your patch.
Well, no, other than that, I'm delighted that it is obviously making excellent progress. I'm a member of the steering group, so we had a very detailed update last week. So that's why I'm probably question less this morning. But yes, I'm fully aware of what's been doing. So I think really, really pleasing, excellent. And also, I noted the steelworks starting to go up as well at the weekend. So that's very positive news indeed. It actually feels like it's actually now sort of going to be absolutely really happening. So, so all the feedback I have to say from many residents that I speak to about that as well is actually extremely positive. So, well, thank you for all the work they're doing.
Thank you very much.
Chair, it might be, sorry, might just before we take any other questions, it might be just worth noting that we do have a fairly robust series of governance in place around the project from a number of aspects. So we have an internal project team that meet on a monthly basis, which is officer based, but also with the external development partner and others, so that we are all aware of what's going on. And that's quite a wide group, so that everyone and anyone who has an interest internally with it, whether it be building control or health and safety or the planning team, people from sustainability can feed in or pick up any issues that are coming forward on a regular basis, and we can also identify any new or emergent risks that are occurring. There's then the steering group, which is an external stakeholder group. As Councillor Cushing said, he sits on that, but that's quite a wide group in terms of the community and interested stakeholders. But there's also a performance project management meeting on a monthly basis with the contractor, where they go through in detail everything they've done, where they are in terms of the timetable. So there's quite a strong, and certainly risk management is a big focus on that. So there's quite a strong set of governance arrangements in place to enable us to monitor this project and how things are progressing. One of the things that we're now doing is bringing in the 3G pitch, which had been somewhat sort of we decoupled it as a project from the planning of the original site. Now we need to re-engage that process so that others in terms of the 3G pitch can have awareness, and all of the steering group and the other groups can be involved or aware of what's going on and the intricacies of that project. So that's what we're currently doing.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to hear about the completion date, because I trawled through and I couldn't find it, and I couldn't find it on the action plan either. And so I'm glad that we have it, because perhaps it's here and I just missed it, but I'm glad it's on track and to know what the actual completion date is. So thank you for that.
Yes, so there'll be a period of time at the very end of the project where the centre is closed, so that the final finishes can be done, so that the staff can be trained, etc. So the completion for the main swimming pool, I think from my memory, I think it's the 18th of December for the new facility to open. And then the 3G pitch work will obviously commence, hopefully in sort of January, February of the following year, to enable us to do that. But from a government grant point of view, the main centre is their focus, the Levelling Up Fund, and so we are well within their deadline date now of when they want it done. So from our point of view, it's I'm really pleased with the fact that we're on track, because I get the impression from speaking to officials within a MHCLG that that's not necessarily the case in terms of all of the levelling up projects that are out there across the piece. So yeah, it's worked very well.
No, it's very welcome news. And so I noted that the full closure was going to be extended from 1 to 3 weeks. Has that been an issue with the steering group comprising residents there? Not?
No, I think it was always understood that there would be a period of closure anyway. So I don't think that's probably a small price to pay for what we're going to get at the end of it. So yeah.
Okay, lovely.
And that period of extension, Chair, is because of the introduction of the public sector decarbonisation scheme, because obviously we cannot do that. That involves replacement of systems within the current sports centre, both in terms of taking out the current gas heating hot water provision and replacing it with the air source heat pump as the alternative carbon efficient or carbon improved situation, but also improving the heating and ventilation and building management within that. So effectively, we just can't do that with the centre in use.
Okay. Thank you very much. Did you have a question, Councillor Hankins? Okay, I just have a quick on page 17, third paragraph. I think it's managed rather than mained in the last sentence. I don't know quite what mained means, but it sounds very sort of animalish, really. So just
I'm
the
sure
line
you are.
right.
I'm sure you're correct.
Anyway,
Chair.
otherwise, it's a very excellent update. And if anyone has any other questions, no, you're happy to note it. Lovely. Okay, well, thanks very much, Officer Hems. We promise not to keep you very long. Both officers, you can be, you can leave now because I'm now going to talk about the work programme. So, is that all right? Don't look. You can stay if you want. No.
I'm fine, Chair, but I'm just conscious that you might have something on about deprivation.
All right.
So if you wanted me to
You want
stay
to
just in
listen to that?
case,
Yes,
then
absolutely.
I'm happy to do so.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much indeed. So, sorry, we're going on to the update from the Assistant Director for People Services. Sorry, I missed that. And we're going to take a verbal report from Officer Denny because Officer Grant couldn't attend.
Yes, just to update members, you'll see that on the agenda, it was listed as a verbal update from the Assistant Director of People Services. She has sent her apologies. She's unable to attend at short notice, but she has shared a very thorough report actually, but it came through late yesterday. So we printed out copies for members and obviously it will be circulated by email. But I do appreciate you won't have had time to look at the report. I'll hand over to Officer Hems in a minute if he wants to speak as well, but the key sort of issues for the committee really are on page 6, where Officer Grant refers to a new poverty strategy that the council is looking at producing and asks for some input from the committee. This item, as you'll be aware, has come out of queries in the past around deprivation data. So it is something that the committee has been interested in for a while, and Officer Grant pulled this together from the council's resources, also aligning with sort of wider national statistics as well. So there are also some useful statistics at the back of the report that you might want to look at. So before I hand over to Officer Hems, having discussed it with the chair, we were thinking that as you've got the homelessness strategy coming in July and the poverty strategy will sit alongside that, that might be an opportunity for Officer Grant to come back, answer any more questions that you have on this deprivation data, see if there's another strand that you also want to look at relating to the deprivation data. But I will hand over to Officer Hems, who may want to speak a bit more about the strategy and the work that Officer Grant and her team have been doing for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Officer Grant apologises for not being here. As you're probably aware, she's relatively new to post, and so she is exceptionally busy dealing with quite a number of issues of getting, her understanding and moving things forward in terms of the service area. I think it's fair to say that this report doesn't go into the details of deprivation within the district, predominantly on the basis that the deprivation is one of those issues that when you look at the indices of deprivation, they're very varied and very detailed. And so what Officer Grant has tried to do here is to pull out the elements, I suppose, that are of greatest significance to North Norfolk and try and explain how we're using that in order to shape our, use that data-driven approach to try and make sure that we're making the best interventions possible to do two things really. One, put measures in place in order to make sure that those in deprivation and in greatest need are targeted with the support that's required. And two, to try and move people from a position of a reactionary, you know, you're in terrible need and therefore we're going to give you service, to let's identify you earlier on in the process, and therefore put interventions in place that try and prevent you actually getting into that crisis level of need. So there are two bits of note in terms of, I think, the interventions. One is the low income family tracker or LIFT dashboard that we use. And I think the bold bit in page 2 of the report, which basically highlights that since we've been using that in 2023, it's drawn in 2.3 million of unclaimed benefit to residents within North Norfolk, I think is, you know, a testament to the activity that the team do in order to make sure that we're supporting our most vulnerable residents as fully as we are able to. And then the other, I suppose, piece in terms of that, in terms of the other activity, is this bit of identifying people using the Better Off calculator that tries to enable people to who are in work to access financial help or other things to maximize their income, so that we're trying to improve their financial resilience and make sure that they're not going to a crisis position. And I think that's working very positively to enable our residents to be more self-resilient. So I'm happy to take any questions on the report. However, I would ask you to be nice to me, because this is not my particular area, although it's my responsible area. It's not my detailed area of knowledge. So I'm happy to try and take any questions, but anything you do ask, I might need to refer back to Officer Grant for a more detailed answer, if that's okay.
Thank you very much indeed. That's very helpful. It's a little bit difficult to get my teeth into it because there's quite a lot of information here, but would you like to jump in, Councillor Cushing?
Well, it's hard to ask questions on a report that we haven't actually read, so I don't think we're going to get very far today. So I'm following Officer Denny's suggestion. It sounds like it might be something that we need to look at in July.
I also think it's one of those reports best read online because there's some links in it that'll be quite helpful, I think. And put some substance behind it. Councillor Gray, did you have any questions?
It's only really going to say it's good to know that the deprivation data is being looked at. It's really important, it is really detailed, and it is really complex. Hopefully this will be a little bit of a springboard towards us looking at this in a little bit more depth. But I agree with Councillor Cushing. It's a little bit short notice to be able to make too many comments, but thank you for providing it anyway.
Councillor Rouse and Councillor Rouse first.
Living in a ward with quite severe sort of deprivation, I'm grateful that that this report is being put together. I think we should save it for another day, though, when we've all studied the report and had a chance to analyse it in its entirety. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Hankins?
Yeah, I raised the question of the influence of domestic violence, particularly on housing and clearly on deprivation. And I understand it, in talking to the the Officer for Democratic Services, that the best way to fold this in will be to include it in the area covered by this. And I think it's important that that's part of that. So I look forward to seeing that element. I haven't had time to read this. I don't know whether it's even covered in it. So I think that's important because, as I say, it is an important factor on homelessness. And so that clearly is the area it should be raised in, and look forward to seeing that in a report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Looking at the number 8, which is supporting residents with health-related barriers, would it be possible if we looked at that again to have more detail of outcomes of your interventions? Because I think we see them on a portfolio holder report on a, you know, every other month basis, but it'd be quite nice to see that all collated.
Yes, I'm
As
happy
well.
to
Is that possible?
to feed that back. And in fact, one of the questions I was going to ask committee was, are there any, in order to enable Officer Grant to tailor her report to the level of detail you want, if you know, if there are any areas of particular interest, such as the supporting residents with health related barriers, then I'm happy to take that away and feed that back in. Doesn't have to be done now at all.
No.
But if we could have that so that Officer Grant can, you know, if there are any particular areas, having had chance to read this, that you think actually we'd like to delve into more, but certainly I'll take back the health related barriers, more detail request.
Councillor Gray?
If we haven't, would it be helpful that the link to the actual deprivation data was shared with members, so you can have, I mean, I appreciate it's a very complex document, there is a lot there, but even just being able to look at the headline data may help to shape queries that we have moving forward.
Thank you.
Happy to make sure that members have got that. I think it has been circulated to all members previously at some point, maybe. But if not, we can share. I think one of the difficulties about reporting a report such as this is there are two temptations, or there are two risks, I suppose. One is that people focus very much on your area, understandably so, and the second is that when you look at the complexity of the deprivation indices and deprivation data of an area, there's a real potential to disappear down a rabbit hole of stuff that is just, you know, influenced by so many different factors. And so that's why Officer Grant has tried to keep it fairly high level. But if there are, you know, those focuses on particular areas, then we're more than happy to try and pull that together on a district-wide basis.
I think disappearing down a rabbit hole is a risk we probably should take. I'm sure someone's got a terrier around who could come and extricate us if necessary. It might be worth, because people don't need to look at it if they don't want to.
I'm happy to. I'm happy to.
Great.
I think it's one of those things where what you probably need to do is to provide you with the link to the indices,
Yep.
and to provide you with a bit of a high level guide to what's within there and how to navigate your way around, and probably some of the areas that are of some of the pitfalls, I suppose, so that we can try and explain some of the areas that might look odd within the indices that actually aren't necessarily odd, because some of the data you look at and go, well, that can't possibly be right, because it compares on a national basis to say this is in the top whatever percent. So we need to just explain some of those high level bits to you if that's where you're if that's where you want to go or what you want to do. But yeah, happy to arrange that.
Also, cross-referencing it to the paper would be quite good. Because this would be nice to have, I mean, data and outcomes are always good. So the more, you know, perhaps if there's particular areas where it could be cross-referenced, if it's not too much work.
And I think in fairness to Officer Grant, she had this as a relatively recent request, but also the potential was for it to take weeks to go, you know, if you want everything, it literally is weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks worth of work. So I think at this stage, she produced you something to give you the high level information, so that, you know, that it enables a firm conversation of the areas that you want to then look into in further detail, if that's acceptable.
Don't get me wrong, please thank her for an excellent report done at very short notice in a new area. It's very impressive. There's a lot of work here for staff in this. Do we have the capacity to deliver all these interventions, which we know are very effective and very much welcomed?
I think within the scope of the work that North Norfolk District Council is responsible for, the answer is yes. I think there are peaks and troughs of work, or rather, there are peaks of work. I don't think there are particularly troughs, if I'm honest. at, for example, some of the financial inclusion team have worked incredibly hard and diligently in the run up to the Easter bank holidays, because obviously people are then saying, hang on, I've got a longer period of time before I can access assistance and help that I might need. And so, you know, there are those times when it's very busy, and I think there are some pinch points. In general, yes, we have the staff that we need. Could you, I suppose it's that situation where you're in, is the district council the provider of last resort, and where are the other areas in terms of other responsibilities by other agencies, etc., where effectively that burden is falling onto the district council. And so you could say, yes, we have enough resource, but if you put more in, yes, you could do more. But I think then there's that risk that you just end up being the provider of last resort that everybody looks to and says, well, don't worry about it because the district council will do it. And that, I think that's an important thing where we need to recognise we do an exceptionally good job as a local authority, to provide for our residents and represent their needs, including into other bodies, and provide challenge through a lot of our activity through social prescribing and a lot of the other things, benefit provision. So there's a lot of representation of people to make sure that we're offering them the best service that they can and that they're getting into that activity. I just don't think we can meet all of the need, because if you meet all the need, there will be further need. And so it's a bit, could you provide more resource? Yes, as a district council, we could provide an infinite amount, or almost infinite amount of resource. And there would always be people who would have additional need beyond what we were able to provide. So I think in terms of the job that we're doing and where our responsibility lies, including into some of the discretionary areas, we provide a good level of resource for the residents of North Norfolk.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that that's borne out on the ground. I'm very impressed with the financial inclusion team, for example, and other benefits people being very helpful. So take my thanks extended to them.
Thank you.
Councillor.
I will do so.
Heinrich.
Thank you, Chair. Just looking through, there's plenty of statistics there. Is there any possibility that our GIS could map the areas of highest deprivation on any useful form for us? My geographical background, I like maps. Does make the data often easy to understand.
I'd have to check, but I think in terms of some of the work or some of the activity around those indices of deprivation, there probably are maps that show that down at, I think, the lower super output area, so down on a very tight geographical area. So you should, when we do the, when you look at the deprivation data, you should be able to see that linked across on a both. I'm not quite sure what level it takes it to. I think you can see it sort of mapped out across the district, certainly at medium super output area, which is a geographical boundary, and then that lower super output, which is a much smaller geographical bound. So yes, I think you can see that. We wouldn't need to produce it because I'm pretty certain it's produced as part of the deprivation data.
Thank you. And if that could be brought forward, can we return to this? Would be useful.
Yes, I mean when we do that position around providing you with the links to it and the information, we'll make sure that you're able to do that. But I mean, I would suggest that as well as a scrutiny committee, it's probably something that all members would want to be aware of, because it gives you data in terms of your, in all members' patches, in terms of where the deprivation, where the issues are around various things. So we'll look at making that available on to members, probably via the member information bulletin, so that you're aware of what's there.
Thank you very much. Any further questions? No, I mean, it's a very impressive piece of work, Steve, for someone newly imposed. So please extend our thanks again.
Thank you, I will do, and I'll take your thanks, your personal thanks, back to the officers that work in the people services team in general, because I think one of the things that I would say is that you've referenced the financial inclusion team and officers in benefits. People's services work in an incredibly integrated way so that people aren't just passed, oh, that's a benefits issue, or that's a, they work incredibly closely to make sure that they are providing as much of a holistic service to people on various issues. And generally it's focused, there's two focuses. First focus is about helping those in greatest need that are in that crisis need and need help now. And the second focus is very much on those that aren't there yet, but might get there. And so the activity that we do to support and help people to not fall into a position of crisis, I think is absolutely vital, because it's much easier to assist people when they have that self-resilience, or make them self-resilient, so they're able to look after themselves, and they're in a position where they can make choices and access benefits and activities that will stop them becoming a point of intervention, if you like, for us, because they're needing those more immediate crisis level services.
Could the help hub be better publicised for residents so they can proactively contact the council? Or is there a danger that there'd be too much of a call on the service if you did?
I think there's certainly a case that we promote quite heavily the help hub. Whether we could promote it more, I think I think the routes into the help hub or routes into our services are well known with partner agencies, and often those people who are needing service, they'll either self-refer to us or they'll be referred from other partners. And so in some respects, there is a very good mechanism for getting those in the greatest need, or those that need it, into our system, and that partly is around that low-income family tracker, and other activities enable us to identify people through the systems to start that intervention and that help on an early basis. So I'm not entirely sure. I mean, it's one of those difficult things, isn't it? Would it make a difference? It might, in a very small number of cases, but generally people who are in need of those services are either not going to be looking and going, oh, I wonder where I'll go and look for a help hub or for some level of intervention, because they're in the position where they are struggling and their focus is very much around their circumstances, etc. Or they're involved with other agencies or other service providers that enable them to go, hang on a minute, we could perhaps provide assistance via X, Y, or Z. So I think in general, we are, there is the systems that we have in place, I would say, are appropriate, but certainly I'll talk to Officer Grant about, whether additional promotion of our services, would be a benefit.
Sorry.
I've certainly mentioned it to a few residents and nobody's ever heard of it. So, these are residents that I can see are potentially in need. So I think you're saying that you don't think many people would take it up if it were more publicised to the broader public. Is that right? But
I mean,
maybe it's worth trying.
Yeah, and I think that then becomes the issue around making sure that we're helping those. I suppose, there is that thing about, if you publicise something and people who are not at that threshold or at that level are coming forward, we'll help them. But does that start to then mean that the people who are at that level, we're spreading our resources more thinly? And ultimately, with the best will in the world, that there is a degree to which, we can't do everything for everybody. And so yes, signpost to other services and do, yeah. I'll have that conversation with Officer Grant and see whether that is something that we feel is appropriate to do.
Can I just jump in there? Social prescribing would fit into the same category, I think. Because it used to be quite easy to access and then it sort of disappeared off the radar and then somebody doesn't do it and where'd you get it and how do you refer people in and that sort of thing. Could that be made more available as something you could ask at least?
Yes, absolutely. So we have two sort of routes in general, and it two routes into the services that we provide. So there is some of the provision in terms of what North Norfolk is doing that is generated through referrals direct from the primary care network. And as you'll be aware, there are a number of primary care networks within North Norfolk, some of which cross boundaries. And so the route into social prescribing through the primary care network, we only deal with one of the primary care networks. The others are provided through other routes. And then our own social prescribing activity is referred through and into from other services and other sources. So yes, absolutely. You know, if there is opportunity and to raise awareness through members and others, then we're happy to take that way and have a look at it and see what the position is.
That'd be great. Thank you. If everyone's agreed with that, yeah. Councillor Hankins?
The council recently launched two initiatives in terms of helping with the affordability situation, one of which it was 50,000 for food banks, which was being administered by the food bank organisation, I understand. The other one was for energy costs. And I wonder, I know it's fairly recent, what the take-up has been in respect of that. And in the light of the sum of money involved, does it appear, based on the play, that that's going to be adequate or not? That's my question.
Thank
you. I can't tell you what the take-up is at the moment. I'm afraid that the financial inclusion team I know have been very busy in dealing with people who have come in and said, the oil is very expensive, can I have help? I think just after, so the 50,000 you referred to is for heating oil. So I don't think there's another 50,000 to food banks because we were administering it through the food bank process. But yes, certainly, you know, will it be adequate? It depends on how long the crisis goes on for, I suppose, in terms of the grand scheme of things. But equally, we announced that the decision was made, and we announced that prior to government announcing the funding that they put in place to do that. So there are various schemes out there that enable people to access assistance. I think it's about, you know, in some respects, it's about making sure that that money is going to those in greatest need again, where people would be making choices between putting their heating on or purchasing food. It's not there for people to go, oil's gone up a lot, and so can I have part of the £50,000, please? And
I'm not joking.
I think there is, you know, we need to make sure that we're targeting that finance to those in greatest need.
Okay. That, I mean, there's lots more to be drawn out of this, but I think it requires us to study it in greater detail.
I'd welcome a conversation with any member of the committee or as part of a pre-meeting, just to enable officers to hone in on the level of detail that you'd like, because if we were to unpack the whole of the indices of deprivation, this would be an exceptionally long meeting.
We don't want to overburden you unnecessarily.
So I just think if there are areas such as, you know, the health related barriers, such as some of the stuff to do with how it links in with our social prescribing and domestic violence, etc., and those we can start to pick those out and find the level of detail that's appropriate for you. It won't be ward by ward, because, or it might be area by area, but you know, that would be for you to then potentially go away and have a look at for yourselves on a detailed basis. But you know, certainly as a highlight headline, information, we can look at pulling those out for you.
So would that be more efficient to do that by individual emails rather than waiting for another meeting? Because we don't meet till May now. And it seems to me that this is, I mean, I'm just not just thinking about oil being expensive, petrol's very expensive. And if you look at the data here about rural poverty, you know, there's lots of other things that are quite urgent at the moment. If we wait till June, then it seems rather a long time in the future. Would you be prepared to accept suggestions by email from members once they've read the paper?
If they could be done through the scrutiny officer, then yes, certainly we can. That just enables me to us to coordinate things. But if that's
Or would you
okay,
prefer a face-to-face meeting? I'm just thinking of being efficient, that's all.
I'm happy to for them to go back individually. We can collate them, and then we can perhaps, if we need, we could just have a conversation and say, where's. I'm just concerned that for two things. I don't want to take officers away from doing the
Yes.
do.
Yeah.
But equally, I don't want to get to a point where the level of information that you're getting is more than you can cope, more than you could scrutinise within a reasonable period of time. So I think we just need to find a balance. And it might be that if there are hundreds of requests around things, we need to say, right, which from a committee point of view are the most important to you to focus on, or someone's asked for this and someone's asked for this. They're similar. Can we do it as a combined approach? So yeah, I would be happy to do that.
That's great. Did you think on that?
I do appreciate everything that you're saying there. I've spent some time looking at the data, so I know how complex it can get and how low level it really can become. It might be worth holding fire just a little bit until members have actually had a chance to look at the data first and have a think about what areas might interest them, and then maybe we can come together as a committee and try to agree something that we would like to drill to together, because otherwise I think there's going to be so many different things that come off of this that we're going to get nowhere, and we're going to start quibbling about 0.4 of everything, and we don't need to be doing that. We need to be effective in what we're doing. So I think let's have a look first, see what is of interest to each person in their area, then come together and try to agree some common strands. I think that would be a sensible approach.
Just that we bounce that back to June then.
Sadly, yes, I think so.
Our poor population will be deprived even longer. Apart from the fact all this wonderful work is happening at the moment, don't get me wrong. We're very impressed. Okay, we'll leave it at that then. We'll meet and discuss it. So Steve, thank you very much indeed.
You, and if it's okay, Chair, I will now absent myself and go and do some
Your
other
presence
business.
will be much appreciated. Thank you very much. Okay, so now we move on to noting the Cabinet Work Programme. Does anyone have anything they want to say about that? Or officers, do you want to take us through that in any way?
I wasn't intending to, but happy to if members would
Have
think
any
it would be
questions
useful.
about the Cabinet Work Programme? I'm taking that as a no. Okay, so if we go to the Review and Scrutiny Committee Work Programme. So this is where we start thinking about our upcoming work plan. And we could look at it in various different ways. Emma, Officer Denny, you had a outline scoping document you might share with us. We also have what is it you have put down here as scheduled, and whether we should go through the topics that we have already suggested and weed out the ones that we thought perhaps were no longer relevant, and even go through the schedule as presented and weed out anything that's no longer relevant. How would you guys like to play it? Do you want to look at what you got in front of you first?
Chair, may I just suggest we've got the standard item, which is the overview and scrutiny work programme and update, which is in the agenda pack. I'm not proposing to go through any of those action items at the moment. I can assure the committee that Officer Falconbridge has made sure all the actions are up to date, and are being followed up. So what we would then do is to go through to item 14, which is the work programme setting. So there's two separate items just
Okay.
for.
So do you want to, anybody want to make any comments on the recommendations tracker? I'm disappointed we haven't seen responses from the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology about rural roaming.
Yes, I know Officer Falconbridge has actually chased that one up twice.
without reply.
I think that's disappointing. Could we also be updated as to where that habit members bill on rural roaming, because that was something that we asked our MP to support, and that would be the indirect. The passage or not of that bill would be the indirect consequence of our request, as it were. It'd be nice to have that.
Yes, Chair, I'll note that and get an update on that for you.
Any other comments about the recommendations?
Got to be clear, these recommendations on the
Talking about
work
page
program.
31, the recommendations and actions, package,
Okay,
the recommendations that we've made that we're
Yeah.
trying to keep a handle on.
Yeah, I've got one comment. Mobile connectivity.
Yeah,
The two presentations that we had, the first one, I don't think took us very far
No.
forward at all. The second one I thought was a lot more interesting, from Vodafone and E, with a proposal, a solution to the problem of not spots in rural areas. They indicated that they were running trials at the moment. Should those trials be successful this summer, then they intended to roll it out for Norfolk. I think it's important that we get an update on that, because that, from what I can see, was the only positive suggestion to come out of all of this, quite frankly. I mean, it's not top of their agenda, is it? Rural connectivity, quite frankly. A, they're not going to make a lot of money. B, it doesn't attract a lot of attention. I think it should do. But so the best sort of I've seen, or the most effective solution, possible solution, is this one from Vodafone and 3. So I think a follow-up on that is quite important. I mean, I don't have any confidence in the other lot coming back and saying what they're going to do.
no.
You know, quite frankly, but it's still worth asking the question. Thank you, Chair.
Any other points about the mobile connectivity update, given that we put a lot of time and effort into it? I don't feel we have got any very far with the updates on page 30 either. Particularly the resilience of masts wasn't a question for the resilience manager, really. It was a question for the operators as to how, and for UK power networks, as to how they guaranteed power to masts in power cuts. It wasn't anything to do more locally than that. So I don't feel we've bottomed that one out at all. We didn't hear at all about BT, about the mobile, the kiosks. That was really a proxy for finding out what the service was, wasn't it? Because if you have a phone box, it means you haven't got any service. So it's probably not worth pursuing too much. I'm disappointed with the having to go back with the MNOs and provide data so that they can analyse where the worst not spot. I don't feel we're getting anywhere with that at all. Councillor Gray.
I feel like that information probably leads us towards what we've discussed before about the idea of a survey across our district that we can do to then actually bring the information forward and say, this is not good enough. I certainly know of some of the feedback I'd had, the map that we had together and the map from the MNOs maybe didn't really correlate with real lived experience of people. So I think we need to look towards that, and that may become part of the lever which we can use to maybe force more of a conversation, or at least start to make them accountable for why their customers in this area are not quite as important.
So do these actions need updating quite considerably, really? Because otherwise we're just going to go around in circles.
I think possibly we do, Chair, but I think it's, for me, it's leading on into whether mobile connectivity is a continuing work programme topic that you want to include in the next discussion.
I think
because that's perhaps what I'm hearing, that there's some ongoing actions, new things that you want to cover. So perhaps that leads quite nicely onto the work programme for the future year.
Okay, well, I'd just like to, I think if we have any actions that we would like bottomed out, we shouldn't lose them, even if we now transmogrify that, if that's the word, into the new work programme. I think there's one or two I think we should have an answer to. Okay, so shall we go through the scheduled items and weed them out before we do blue sky thinking? Would that be sensible? You have already put, is that what you wanted to do or not?
If we want to move on to the work programme setting, Gerald, just show a few slides just to cover how it will work, and then we can look at your future items that you already had on your work programme.
Yeah.
Check you still want them to come forward. Then we'll go through your the cyclical items. We'll sort of work through it, take some suggestions, which we'll take away and scope up so you're not here for ages. And then we'll, at the next meeting, we'll come back with those scored so you can decide what you want to add to your work programme. So I'm hoping it won't take too long, but if I'll start by just sharing, if I can get them open, a few slides. That doesn't help. There you go. Right. So just to sort of remind members that around your annual work programme, and there's sort of broadly two areas of scrutiny that you'll need to fit in. So you've got your planned scrutiny, and which is where you'll start looking at the topics that you want to look at over the next year. As I've just said, we'll ask you to submit some suggestions. We'll review them and score them against the criteria, which I'll touch on at the end, and then we'll build them into your work programme according to the priority and the resource available. And they will be slotted in around your cyclical items, those standard finance reports, corporate plan and so on that come through. Then you've got responsive scrutiny, which is almost impossible to predict, obviously. We do need to leave some space in your work programme to allow for those topics that arise through the year. There could be live issues that are of concern to communities. They could be raised by members. So things like call-ins or councillor call for action come into this category. So anything that's, you know, very sort of important or is coming through at short notice. And they need to be slotted in as and when needed as effectively. So again, it's tricky, but you know, we do need to have a bit of capacity in there to build in those items. Occasionally you'll get things that are coming through cabinet at short notice that you'll also want to look at. So that's the challenge, trying to, you know, you're just a single committee. A lot of councils have different committees operating, you know, you're just one committee meeting monthly. So there's a lot to try and plan in and to not overload you basically. So planned scrutiny, as I've said, going to ask you to just put forward some topics. We will score them and then we'll bring them back to your next meeting. And when you review your work programme at the next meeting, we'll put some suggestions where we think they can slot in, but you may have to make some decisions and some may have to fall off. You know, we're probably not going to be able to take everything forward. And I've just put at the bottom there, each meeting, ideally we like to aim for 3 items, no more than 4 for your meeting, because it does, as we know, it can become quite a heavy meeting otherwise, and you do want the time to dedicate to each item. So only 1 planned scrutiny item to a meeting, and there may be occasions where we can't even do that if you've got very heavy, you know, got finance heavy meeting coming up. And also obviously building a bit of capacity in for your for any responsive items too. So responsive scrutiny, as I've said, it's where you're effectively having to react to issues as they come through. So that's why you have the cabinet work programme on your agenda, so that you can look on there and think, actually, we would like to look at that. There may be some things that wouldn't automatically come through to scrutiny. Your finance reports, your corporate plan, we pull them through automatically, but there will be some items relating perhaps to projects that cabinet are looking at that you can say, we would like to look at that as well. So we can pull that through and build it in. You've got pre-scrutiny as well. So we talked about the poverty strategy earlier. You know, you probably want to have engagement early on, looking at that and feeding into it. So that's, you know, something that you need to think about, and then you'll obviously be recommending through to cabinet. As I've already mentioned, you've got unexpected issues that arise, and that could be something that maybe arises from a petition that's come through. or we don't have it very often, but we have had councillor calls for action in the past where a councillor can bring a ward matter through that's of concern to them that they want the committee to look at. So all of those are sort of fall within that responsive area, and it is quite tricky to allow capacity for that, but it is important because you know, you can get some quite big items coming through that mechanism. And then I just sort of briefly sort of finish off with the difference between overview and scrutiny, your two functions, because they can sort of get a bit confused. But ideally, you want your work programme to include a mix of both if you can. So obviously overview is the proactive sort of side of it, policy development, pre-scrutiny, shaping future decisions, that critical friend role that everyone talks about with scrutiny, and feeding into decisions and so on. And then you've got your scrutiny function, which is more reactive, looking at decisions that have already been made or implemented, the performance side, which you review, and checking value for money, reviewing finance reports and so on. And then just to remind you of the criteria that we sort of look at when we're looking at topics for selecting items. And this is what we will look at when we look to effectively score the items that members suggest. Is it of interest to local residents, something that they're talking about? So like the mobile connectivity stuff that you had coming through. Can you have an impact and add value? Because sometimes you can look at things that may be of huge interest to your residents, but if you can't actually make a difference or have any impact at all, it may be best to refer it onto the body that can do that. Do we have the resources available to do the review? Will be around the timing of some of these items as well. If there is a big piece of work there, we may have to put them a bit later on in your work programme to allow for that resource to be put in place. Does it relate to an area where the council or one of its partners is not performing well? So again, you've had I'm not going to say that Anglian Water's not performing well. I won't go into that territory, but we have called in partners or stakeholders into the committee. We've had our housing associations in before in the past. So again, you as a committee, you can call in partners or stakeholders to come in and talk to you and respond to questions. And perhaps at the bottom, again, this is something that we'll have to look at. Does it? We need to try and avoid duplication of work elsewhere if possible, because there's particularly from the resource side, we don't want you sort of duplicating work that's being done elsewhere. We can get updates on work that's being done elsewhere fed through to you, but that's a sort of one of the key factors to consider as well. So I think that is everything. Yep. So if I shut that down, and I think we were going to just start with looking at the items that you had hanging over on your work programme. So these were items, some of which have been suggested by members throughout the year, but which we haven't scheduled in yet. And we just wanted to gauge from you whether you still wanted to look at these items and build them in, whether we can perhaps tweak them so that, and you'll see that I've put local government reorganisation there. That's obviously a huge issue. We don't have the full set of work streams and so on around that. So it's difficult for us to plan in. We may need to have monthly updates on that. You may want to look at it maybe 2 or 3 months. But a couple of those things underneath may well slot into that LGR kind of heading. So the impact on the workforce, possibly asset management, sale of assets and so on. We don't know yet. So I'm happy to take your steer on that, members, and from you, Chair, if there's anything on there that I don't think you can not look at LGR. I have to say, I don't think that's a choice necessarily. I'm just not clear how it's going to feature in your work programme, but certainly the things further down, the public transport, ambulance response, dentists, deprivation data we've touched on already a bit today. But if there's any comments from members regarding that before we move on, it'd be great.
Well, aren't they all active today? I mean, I can't see anything on that list that we'd want to drop off, quite frankly. I mean, public transport and speed limits is a very active issue. Ambulance response times have not improved much. Dentists is still an issue, although there is some progress in that area. And we've just discussed deprivation data. So all of those, I think, are very key, quite frankly.
Councillor Hankins. I'm sorry, Heinrich.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think the first three will all evolve together as part of the LGR processes. No, I don't think there's any rationale for considering them separately. Public transport and speed limits, yeah, it's an ongoing issue. I mean, I'm lucky in North Walsham we've got good public transport. We have issues over speed limits, certainly. Public transport is not good in any more rural parts of our district. Who the portfolio holder at county will be after May is anybody's guess. I think it's probably better to give them a few months to get up to speed with it before we invite them in. Ambulance response times, it would be a useful update. I think there's anecdotally we've never noticed any real improvements. I had too many times for people waiting many hours for an ambulance if they're low priority or regarded as low priority. Not sure what we do about dentists. We know it's a problem. We know there's been campaigning by the MPs. Whether we can have any influence, I don't know. Yeah, it's a real issue, but I'm not sure it's one we can actually influence. Well, that depends on that depends on the dentist actually wants to take up the post. I mean, it's going off topic, but I can think that the own dental practice I use in North Walsham gave up NHS work years ago. Arm and a leg stuff these days, but they have been advertising for a third dentist for over 3 years. No applicants. And that's the situation we're in. The dentists don't want to come here. Providing facilities is one thing, but
I think we have to debate whether we have it's actionable from us, Dr. Councillor Gray.
I'll head a little bit in the other direction here. The LGR stuff obviously is important. It's going to devour a lot of time. I believe we discussed the speed limits and such. Maybe when the PCC were to visit, we may be able to fold that into that. But looking at ambulance response times and dentists, what impact can we actually make? What value do we actually add? Because I believe, certainly not while I've been present, but I know that these items have been discussed before. We have looked at this before. And I believe Councillor Heinrichs just said ambulance times aren't altering. What ability do we have to really impact that? And while I don't want to seem like I'm championing a cause on deprivation data, that's somewhere we haven't really looked when we could have an impact, because we do have services that run from here that actually integrate with those issues directly. I think that might chew up more time than we realise between those couple of items there. Not to say that dentists and ambulance times aren't important. They absolutely are, for clarity. I'm just thinking about our impact.
In defence of ambulance response times, actually, and probably dentists, I think lobbying for certainly we did, there was some pressure on the ICB to get more money into dentistry, and there has been more urgent care in dentistry. There are more slots available. And so some work has been done, and some of that obviously was central government money and probably was going to happen anyway. But I did think there was a slight influence there. The ambulance response times is much more complex than just the ambulance service. It's the whole health system. So it's the delays at the hospital due to social care delays, etc., simplifying it hugely, but that are making the problem. So, I think if we did the ambulance response times, it would need to be a part of a bigger picture with other providers, actually. But I mean, you can. I think pressure does work to a certain extent. So I wouldn't take it off the table completely. But I totally agree with what you're saying about deprivation. Councillor Lee.
Oral health is so important. It has massive impacts on overall health, heart health and everything. That surely there is something we can do to improve people's dental health, even if it's not getting a dentist. And it's shocking that a dentist has been advertising for a new colleague for 3 years and not being able to find one. I mean, is there not something we could do to help with that?
So,
And, you know, and educating children about brushing their teeth, that sort of thing is a sort of low level thing that we could do that could help.
so whether we
with
have any
oral
interventions there. Okay, let's leave dentistry is important with a question mark. Let's leave it. I've got Councillor Hankins first and Councillor Rouse, and then we'll come back to you.
It is not in the gift of the council to do anything about the last three. But what is in the gift of the council is to provide a very strong lobbying activity. These organisations respond to lobbying. It's a massive business, lobbying, and it's a massive business because organisations respond to it. So although we can't do anything about the ambulance situation, lobbying the ambulance service to say our residents are not happy with what you're doing, what are you doing about it, is a very effective lobbying situation, and I think we should keep it in the mind's eye. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Rouse.
I think we can all agree that these are massively important issues. It's just about whether we can influence them or not, really. I think definitely with lobbying, that is an example of something that we can do. So maybe it's something we should keep on the programme. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gray.
I completely agree with the comments on lobbying. That's not what I'm saying. My actual comments were, even if we are to lobby the ambulance service and they are massively overworked, overstretched, and a million other things, we could say our residents are not happy, it is not good enough. But I suspect that we'll end up with a similar outcome to Anglian Water, where we listen to relatively the same thing because we know things aren't changing. It's not really something that is, as has been said, in our gift to change. I would rather that we absolutely acknowledge them. Absolutely, there's nothing wrong with lobbying for better and asking for better, but not to divert too much time to something we can't actively impact and affect through the actions that we can take as a body.
Okay, I think we've got a two-pronged approach here. Councillor Cushing.
Yeah, I'm supporting. I mean, there's merit in both arguments, but to pick up the points that Councillor Hankins has made, I mean, we've spent a lot of time recently looking at mobile connectivity, and all of us agree we can't do anything about it. But as a result of that, we actually ended up on the front page of the EDP. I think you ended up having been interviewed on one of the BBC programmes about it, which has highlighted the issue, which we hope in itself helps put pressure on the mobile connectors to actually do something about it of an area which otherwise wouldn't have been highlighted. So take Councillor Gray's point as well. But I think that there is the balance I think we do need to, and in this cabinet to do. So I wouldn't like to see things drop off the agenda really that I think we possibly can have an influence on. So
okay. So I don't see mobile connectivity on this list. Is that
No, that would be, so we'll move on to your broader
incorporated.
programme now, which what we'll do is we'll take these away and score them. So you may find that some sort of drop down. We'll see how we go when we look at your broader programme, because that I'll go to that now, and then you can have a, so this has other items that are already scheduled in for upcoming months. So you've got Anglian Water on there. We did have a request from Development Committee to look at a flooding drainage issue around a development in Cromer, which is probably a bit too specific for the committee, but we could widen it out to ask Anglian Water to address concerns or respond to concerns relating to drainage issues and new housing development. So, and you will need to think about whether you want Anglian Water to come back every 6 months still, whether there's still enough concern there around sewage outflows, new housing developments and so on. So that's something. We've got the rural strategy, which I think is on hold at the moment. Plus this, yeah, we might need to combine those two. Your cyclical items are in here, so you can see how that your programme's already reasonably heavy. You've got the Police and Crime Commissioner due to come in September. That is a a statutory requirement for you to have them in to review their crime thing. I think we did discuss with members that perhaps looking at the public transport and the speed limit issue, we could split it, and perhaps that we could ask the Police and Crime Commissioner to focus on speed limits. That was something she
Yep.
seemed particularly keen on last time, and it may give some focus to that session. And that would, then we can have the portfolio holder at county to come in and talk perhaps about the public transport thing, so that they're kept as separate items. But you will see from here, we don't have your mobile connectivity item scheduled in because we weren't sure how members wanted to progress with that. So if you do want to bring it back, which it sounds like you do, we'll have to build that in as well. And then, yes, you've got, we'll see, as we head towards later in the year, it becomes heavy again on finance items. We may be able to group some of these finance items. I've lost them now. Oh yeah, down here, is you know, non-domestic rates, and you have capital, you know, you could do a sort of block your finance items together. So it's not to say you can't have anything else on those dates at all, but it, as you know, it becomes quite heavy into budget setting, although you have nothing in January at the moment. So that's the kind of challenge that you've got at the moment, really. From what the discussion we've had this morning, you've got your homelessness and rough sleeping strategy, possibly a discussion around the poverty strategy at the same meeting. And then for not next month, June, we'll build in that discussion around your deprivation data and homing in on that. So I think, I don't know if members have views on Anglian Water, how you want to progress with that, whether you want to keep it on or not. Councillor Heinrich?
I think if we do have them in, we need to use the same technique of pre-prepared questions to really focus them in on specific issues. I think if we take it this time as you know, it is the impact of the quality of their drainage systems and flooding, you know, and then it does allow the Chroma one to just be put in as one question. Yeah. Albeit we'll explore it more generally as well.
Is there a question still about capacity? Because I'm hearing, you know, a lot of concern about capacity, which is always brushed off. So I'd like that included.
Yeah, I think I take Councillor Heinrich's point. I mean, we're coming against a situation where there are known flood problems, known problems with drainage. And the Chroma application is a case in point, where the local residents and members raised the whole problem of flooding in respect of the approval or otherwise of this application. And basically, Anglian Waters almost said there's nothing to see here. You know, it really beggars belief. I honestly don't. I think we have to continue to hold their feet to the fire, because, you know, I question whether they're really looking at these things properly. That's my question. I don't make that point to them, quite frankly. There's a dichotomy here between a situation where it's flooding now, we're going to add to the flood situation, and they're saying we've got it covered. It's a bit like it'll be all right on the night, you know. I really find it quite incredible.
Okay. Councillor Lee.
Yeah, I was at development committee because of the containers, and thank you for helping getting it refused. One of the members was asking if it would be possible to get Anglian Water to produce a reassuring report for residents, confirming that the proposed new development that got the go-ahead isn't going to further adversely affect the flooding situation. So could we ask them maybe to do that? Because that seemed like a really sensible suggestion. It's making Anglian Water put them anywhere their mouth is, for one thing, but it could also reassure residents, because it did sound as if they're going to be two completely different systems.
Mm.
I think at any future meeting, we need to be very focused on the particular problem, on the question we're asking, so that they have to come back with a definitive answer on that particular question, rather than come back and say, it'll all be okay, you know? You understand?
Yeah, I do understand.
Yeah.
Only too well. Councillor Gray.
I suspect where Anglian Water is concerned, we'll get the normal responses and answers, which is it'll be all right on the night. God, Mike.
Oh, sorry.
However, that's the best statement I've ever made. However, I think that the MNO work that we did showed us the different way that we can approach questioning and how we can be far sharper, far more focused. And if there's refusal for them to engage with that, that gives us far more weight. And as Councillor Cushion highlighted, it's easier then to push in the press and hold people accountable, because we did spend some time with Anglian Water, and we know that they're conveniently 10 million litres a day, just under the Ofwat requirement, although apparently they don't know how much water they waste. So it's one or the other, isn't it?
Is there another way to approach the questions then, and not just coming up from us, but actually asking our residents to feed into it? I mean, analogous to that map, not the same, but
No, but that's the methodology that we're starting to deploy here, I think, naturally, which is really, really good to see, because I think asking the residents, that's lived experience on the ground, isn't it? That's not what they've predicted, what they can't measure and do know about, or vice versa. I think that's a really good suggestion, Chair.
so how should we take that forward? Councillor Denny, is there a pro forma that you could circulate that we could just quickly discuss with our parishes before? Because if we're having them back in June, we'd want to get out to the parishes to say, you know, what are your concerns? I can tell you, I can imagine the ones that are going to come back for me. Would that seem reasonable, guys? Otherwise, we're just going to, you know, pluck it out of the ether like we did last. Not that it didn't do a fantastic job last time, don't get me wrong, but if you want to do it differently, is that something that people would be interested in? Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
Chair, I think there's
Yeah, okay. The only thing I'm worrying about, we're not looking at electricity, which I don't think you can look at electricity actually, by the way. You know what I mean? Electricity supply. Is that something that is well,
Sorry.
constraining growth, really?
Oh,
In
right,
terms of
capacity.
Capacity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does anyone have any ideas, concerns about that, or am I a lone voice?
I think you picked up an interesting one there, Chair. It's been an issue when we were talking about mobile connectivity, that there is insufficient power in many rural areas to actually power additional masts and equipment. They can't do much about it. They can put pressure on power networks. They'll probably not listen anyway. None of these large private organisations seem to listen. So that's what we're stuck with. There's the issue, probably, given the oil situation currently, a growing demand for electric cars.
Mm-hmm.
I run a diesel and a petrol, and the price of diesel is horrendous. But we can't put additional charging points in because there is no three-phase supply in many areas.
Is that-
Even in our own car parks, we're restricted on what we can do because there is no power to do it with. So perhaps it is something we ought to look at. Whether we can influence, again, is one of those issues like water and ambulance times and everything else. So we can make the point, but how far will it take us?
Okay. Councillor Gray?
I think, given what you've just said, Councillor Heinrich, I think that we already have the beginnings of a track of evidence about power and the lack of it, with the car parks and the MNOs, and a little bit more digging might reveal some more issues there that we might then be able to take to power providers and say, actually, look, this is the documented evidence to say there is a lack here. That's actually a really, really good good track to run, I think, though.
Okay, good, thank you. Councillor Gray. Sorry, Councillor Russell.
Yeah, I think it would be definitely good to look at electricity because it ties in with a lot of the other issues, including mobile connectivity. Yeah, I think it would be definitely worth a look at. Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Hankins.
A possible new item.
Good.
AI. I understand it's going to have an enormous effect on everything we do, whether we like it or not. I understand that the council are preparing a policy on AI, soon to be published. I think that is an area which falls under the overview situation in terms of overview and scrutiny. I mean, already I have people communicating to me using AI. You can see it's AI because there's no spelling mistakes, things like that. So it's going to affect how the council works.
Bit sweeping, I must say, if you don't mind me interjecting.
Sorry?
That's a bit of a sweeping statement, Councillor Hankins,
Well,
if you don't
it's
mind me interrupting you.
a fact, unfortunately. So,
Okay.
my point is that there is a policy being prepared. Can we use AI in our reports? Is that permissible, or what is the advice on that? As I understand it, this policy will cover those points, and I think at the earliest possible opportunity, we need to see that policy.
Yes, I'll have to go off and talk to officers about when that is ready to come through. I mean, there are lots of aspects to that. There's using AI in our customer services, front desk and so on. There's using it in preparing reports and responding to emails and so on. So I don't know much about the policy, but I can certainly find out when it's being drafted and when it's likely to come through and say that the committee would like to review it. We can add that in.
Idea. Councillor Rouse.
Going off what Councillor Hankins has said about artificial intelligence, I do think it's important to bear in mind its impact on the jobs industry and, the impact that will have, because there will ultimately be job losses due to AI. And I think we have to be mindful of that as a council, and perhaps assess that and analyse that, and perhaps put a report in regards to the job losses due to AI.
Good point. Good point. Councillor Leith.
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to say. Our son works in AI, self-employed, and he knows he is going to put himself out of a job within the next 5 years. And he says there's going to be absolutely huge unemployment as a result of it. So we do need to probably be thinking about the impact that's going to have on our residents and how we deal with that.
Could that be tied into, there's an element of poverty in there as well. If you look at our poverty statistics and our salaries and things like that, and an element of workforce, is it a standalone or is it tying in with something?
Such a large area, isn't it? I think you could look at the policy as, or strategy, I'm not sure what it is, as a standalone item, but it will probably feed into other areas too, around LGR. I mean, it may even feed into things like your poverty strategy with people who perhaps don't have access, necessarily to technology and, access to doctor surgeries, and so on, who are increasingly using AI technology. So, yeah, it's quite a biggish item. We'll have to look at it and see the best way to do that. So I think we'll have to do some work on that and bring it back and present it to you with some options of how you might want to look at it.
Perhaps there should be a routine element in all our reports, AI implications, much like we have net zero, and it would get us starting to think about it, wouldn't it? Just a thought. Was your hand waving? Okay. Well, we've any other suggestions? I think that's quite a lot. Just making sure we haven't lost domestic violence anywhere.
I've made a note of the earlier discussion as well around the domestic violence and that. So we will take away everything from today, score it up, try and come back at the next meeting when under your work programme standing item on the agenda, we'll build in where we think
Okay,
these items might sit. And if your agenda is looking overly heavy, we might have to have some sort of sitting below that we can slot in as and when, but yeah, we'll take that away. Thank you.
good. Has anybody else got any other suggestions? In case you don't. We don't have any need to exclude the present public, do we? So in which case, shall we close the meeting?